without giving
Okay. All right, I'm going to call to order the Planning Commission meeting for the Village of Middleville. Rhonda, if we can have a roll call, please.
Jason Holzhausen,
Here.
Bruce Farrell,
Here.
Maria Gustinus. Here. Richard Hamilton.
Here.
Troy Newman,
Here.
Amanda Pullen. Here. Di Wilkie. Here.
All right, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have an agenda that I want to make a small addition to. Under new business, item B, we need to have a chat about signs. Specifically, temporary signs and flags. Sue.
Support.
Well, I didn't actually make that motion, but you can.
Oh.
I'm just adding an item to our agenda. Do you want me to? Are you gonna do it? Okay.
You are the rule maker, so you need this motion to make.
Yeah, all right. Then I'm going to make the motion. We approve our amended agenda.
Support.
I don't know who supports it. Okay. We have motion with support to approve our amended agenda, adding item B under new business to talk about temporary signs. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have an agenda. Minutes from June 3rd. Questions, comments, corrections? Spelling mistakes? I know, it's,
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as written, or
Yeah,
the
good.
minutes as written.
we have a motion with support to approve our minutes from June 3rd. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have minutes. No members of the public are here. So we are moving on to capital improvement plan recommendation. Mr. Powers.
So the recommendation before you is that the Planning Commission recommended approval of the proposed fiscal year 2025 through 2030 capital improvement plan to the Village Council as required under the Michigan Planning Enabling Act, PA 33 of 2008 of the MCL. So the background, the Planning Commission plays a critical role in aligning capital infrastructure investment with land use and development goals identified in the village's master plan. Although this may be the commission's first formal recommendation on a capital improvement plan, this is a statutory responsibility and best practice that ensures transparency and long-range planning coordination. So if you recall, last meeting, Mr. Stolzenberg had provided an anticipated breakdown for the capital improvement plan. However, I wanted to go over a handful of items as notable projects and then see if the board had discussion points, additions, concerns for things that should possibly be considered. But one of the items being the Paul Henry Trail bridge replacement, as this project proposes replacing aging trail bridges along the Paul Henry Thornapple Trail. Current conditions limit DPW and EMS access to parts of the trail. Replacement will restore emergency access and ensure the long-term safety and function of the trail corridor. Grand Rapids Street through the Main Street roundabout is conceptual, as this is shown in the fiscal year of 2030, but to improve traffic flow as key intersections serving both downtown and industrial areas. The village is exploring the feasibility of a roundabout at Grand Rapids and Main Street. This project would enhance level of service and reduce congestion. The Main Street Bridge streetscape enhancements. In June of 2025, the DDA engaged Williams & Works to develop recommendations for streetscape enhancements along the Main Street Bridge. Improvements may include pedestrian scale lighting, decorative railings, and landscape features with implementation as early as 2026. Our first steering committee meeting will be later this month for that, the individuals who are overseeing that. The East Main Street, Irving Road, east to the village limits being Major Street, identified as Major Street. This project includes full reconstruction of the East Main Street from Irving Road east of the village limits. The scope addresses pavement condition, surfacing infrastructure, and drainage improvements. So the request in action is that the Planning Commission's recommendation will be forwarded to the Village Council to support final consideration and adoption. I will present a summary of the plan at the upcoming meeting and be available, to answer questions or provide clarification on specific projects. Of the items that we discussed at the previous meeting, are there any things that we should talk about, any recommendations we should be making to the council that may impact fiscal changes? Or I don't know what this board's thoughts are. I know the manager presented a lot of information and this is kind of the first time.
Yeah, the notable projects you've called out, I think, are all high priorities. I know the council's working on Calvin Hill Park, because I watched the last meeting, you guys were talking about getting the playground replaced. And so I think that's well on its way. The capital improvements plan is such a large wish list that if you had all the money in the world, it'd be great.
You still couldn't do it all.
And there's a lot of,
Yeah,
a
no.
lot of items do relate to equipment costs, whether it's DPW, or
But as far as the projects that this body would be well invested in, this is, your notable project list is on point.
Was there not talk at one point to do a roundabout over by the high school because of the safety issues? Wouldn't that be more important than this roundabout?
So, great question. We had the engineer did evaluate the level of service, that a roundabout could be an option. We did have, as you recall, the previous year, we had a person who does this quite often, had proposed some options. But the village hasn't been currently investigating doing a roundabout there. The level of services that were provided from current plans, there hasn't been any additional actions or changes being requested. This may also be something that's good to evaluate as we see the new leadership with TK schools trying to get better understanding and engagement. So we better service that part of the community.
I can say this about the roundabout up here. We haven't even talked about that on the council. I've been
Not
there,
in a while.
been there almost 3 years.
That was a Patty thing. She was
That
the one that
was,
was getting grants.
That was widely studied with the last council. And from what I remember reading in the paper, there's just not enough land there to even create a
There's-
safe.
There's
Roundabout.
more here than there is up at the high
Oh,
school.
yeah, but even
So,
up here,
We had, if I recall, there were actual
There were
drawings
drawings done.
done.
Yeah.
It fit,
Yeah.
it worked.
It fits.
Yeah.
Yep.
Blue Zones Initiative,
Yep.
I believe.
That provided those drawings.
Yep.
Yeah, so.
So yeah, we would still need the engineer if that was something
Yeah.
that was going forward. The engineer would still
Yeah.
have to do design renderings. But yeah, I would agree with you, Commissioner, that it's very likely there is sufficient land to do a roundabout. It may just not be any type of roundabout. We may have to be mindful of what we
Yeah.
go there.
It would have to be specifically designed for that space.
Yeah, but you're correct too, being that it will be identified as a 2030 priority, that it's very likely that I'm not certain if that's a wish or if that will be.
Personally, I'd be fine. I think it'd be great. But I don't actually come through there very much when lights lets out anymore.
So there's no concerns, board is satisfied with notable projects outside of Calvin Hill, making sure that there's sufficient funds, for any proposed improvements there.
You know, good?
Mhm.
That's good? Nothing?
I'll send the information to the manager so the council
Yeah.
can receive it.
Do you need a motion on that, Doug?
And we don't need a motion, no.
Just a general consensus?
Just a general consensus is fine.
Okay, thank you, Doug.
You're welcome.
So signs that I wanted to chat about is at the meeting that you guys were talking about, the playground, it came up that our sign ordinance that you were the only member when that got rewritten, correct?
Oh, gosh. No
Um,
wonder you brought it up to me. Yes,
So-
I think I am.
Yeah, the current sign ordinance as it reads, the temporary signs and flags, those feather flags are not allowed, period. And we've had very selective enforcement of that. Because there are feather flags that are owned by the government that end up getting put up.
So-
And so there was a conversation with village president and another trustee about reevaluating that.
So if I can add one thing
Yep.
too, is that we have exemptions in the ordinance that exclude the government from being
Yeah, I know.
regulated by its own signage.
We don't have to follow our own rules. It just looks bad, Doug. So I haven't talked to Kevin, but the gist I got from that meeting was they like to reevaluate allowing those in some form with some regulation. I did chat with Trustee Bishop about it because I was talking with him about other things, but so there's some ideas there to allow them, but not free reign.
And that's what I was gonna ask, is what are
So-
what's the scope of?
If
The-
the commission was interested in potentially, right now, they're listed as a prohibited sign. If they were identified as a temporary sign, any property owner or business can apply for a temporary sign permit at 4 permits per year, not to exceed a 30-day duration. So if they were not viewed as prohibited, we would ask that they would apply for a no-fee permit that we would keep record of when they're applying for permits to verify whether or not they're in conformance.
And just reclassifying those as putting them in the definition of temporary sign, I think would be a quick.
Yeah, we could just
Thing.
remove it as prohibited and they would certainly be a temporary
then-
sign.
If council wanted
I think
to attack it more, we could.
I think that's the direction that everybody had a consensus that make them temporary, have a starting point and an ending point. And if someone wouldn't go 30 days, like the church is having an event that's gonna last over the weekend, sometime that flag ought to be removed.
Yeah,
But, and also concern about 37, the main intersection, because they can be distracted if there's too many of them, going.
so
A little concern there.
I guess the ask to council would be, a first step could be reclassifying them from prohibited to aligning with our existing temporary sign ordinance, which council could decide if that was too restrictive or not restrictive enough, and we could write something new. Or see, we could essentially reclassify them and see how it
I
goes.
think
So,
that,
and one option too, depending on how quick the council and the commissioners are interested in taking action, as is noted under the ordinance committee discussion, we're in the process of updating draft language for each of the zoning districts. So we certainly could modify this with the changes to the proposed districts that were found in our future land use plan, trying to readdress some of the sign transparency, so.
I think, Richard, if you would like to chat with your coworkers on council, we could ask Doug to add that language to our next text amendment to the zoning ordinance, have him start working on that. And if that would satisfy council for now, that I think would be a good first step.
I'll address that during the liaison report, the next meeting.
Perfect.
So is that something that Robert would then enforce if it
His-
says 30 days? Like,
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I have a concern with that.
So,
I have concerns with the amount of trailers just sitting out in front yards and in driveways that have been sitting there for 3 or 4 months and haven't moved. And I just,
I
I'm,
also
con-
see the same thing.
yep, I'm very concerned with him taking on more responsibility.
so being that the notice, or they would receive the permit, I would be most likely contacting him to verify whether or not they're in compliance. So, if he didn't have sufficient time, that's something that I would take care of.
Because they'd be coming to you for that permit.
They'd be coming to
Anyway.
me for the permit. I'd tell them exactly what they need in the time frame. So then if they were not in compliance, I would send them the appropriate notification, letting them know. Because this is a cost to the community, as there's no fee associated with the temporary permits, so can't spend too much time.
Anyone else want Richard to something different? Something new? No? Okay. Yeah, thank you. We'll hear back from council. But yeah, Doug, if you want to write something up to add.
Will do.
Okay. Doug's gonna do all the work.
Yeah, the ordinance committee.
Nothing compared to what it was.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, the full rewrite.
That was ridiculous.
All right, moving on to committee reports, we have a draft ordinance from the ordinance committee in our packet. So what's up, ordinance committee? I read through the accessory dwelling units language and nothing jumped out at me that I wanted to step back from, so.
There's one thing that jumped out at me.
Yeah.
It's it seemed inconsistent, high density. Of course, there's language that'll prevent anything from happening that doesn't fit, of course, but I can't envision an ADU in a high density area. I can't
So,
visualize that in terms of what a high density area looks like and how it's described and defined, how an ADU would fit.
can I address that?
Yeah,
So the language being in here means that in the properties that are zoned that way, they would not have to go to the zoning board of appeals to apply for a use variance, where other properties that are seen as less dense are permitted by right. So it's inherent that we're not trying to discriminate against those areas
Yeah.
where we see more density at. But
I
you are
figured that
correct.
was-
The properties that are zoned or likely shown on our future land use map as being high density, that there are no single-family dwellings in those areas. So this is verbiage that would be in here to prevent possible use variances.
discrimination.
However, it's very unlikely that we will actually see that
That's what
in
I
the
thought.
next 10 years.
Well, as you're gonna say, it could also be written for the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I saw that as helping prevent future issues.
Yeah,
The high-density residential is primarily an apartment complex,
Yeah.
so.
okay.
And that prevents zoning board of appeals work.
Couldn't happen anyway, right?
I was wondering on the general standards, 1 ADU is allowed per lot. So if it's a moderate density, you've got 4 to 6 dwellings, only one of those can have an ADU?
So the ADUs are only for single-family dwelling units. So it has to be a single-family house. That's where the challenge is. If there's, the way this language is written was to protect us from increasing our density beyond what we anticipated it being. So allowing for properties that have sufficient space as to where they may be less dense than the area. This would be a way to help us in getting that, successful growth within the portions of the community where we had anticipated growth to occur.
This would allow an ADU on your parcel, but not on the parcels that have duplexes on Main Street.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And if a property was too small, is
Yeah.
very dense, that may not be an ideal spot for an ADU.
So on a given acre, assuming it fit the footprint, you might have.
You have a
three-
large lot.
You have
you're
three little
golden.
places and one big place. That one big place would be a candidate.
Yep.
Yep, okay. Yeah, I saw that.
So this language was provided for you today because the ordinance committee has been working hard on trying to vet each of these comments and concerns related to not just the accessory dwelling units, but low-density residential, moderate-density residential public facilities, high-density. Being that there's a lot of different zoning as this is looking at each one of the zoning districts, really wanting to get feedback to see if the planning commission is comfortable with some of these, so the ordinance committee can hopefully table these, continue working on others. Then when we get a little further along in the process, bring it back to the planning commission and then start talking at that point about ordinance amendments.
Again, nothing jumped out at me. I think this is good work. I'm assuming it hasn't been through the attorney's office yet.
No, it has not.
What else is on that list? That's a question I should know the answer to.
So the
but-
list is each of the zoning classifications,
Mhm.
reevaluating our special land uses, along with, we were evaluating street standards and parking signage. However, that ordinance was approved at the last council meeting.
Yeah, you were on the Michigan
That's correct.
Association of Planners. There was a nice webinar, so I could meet my educational requirements, that was talking about shifting approvals down the ladder, where from full site plan approval by the full commission to the committee, or
Yeah.
just by administration. And one of the things that I think is something that the village can do is reducing the number of special land use requirements, of things that actually require a special land use, and moving some of those things into a use by right, or approval by staff with some standards and not needing a full
And that's
hearing.
the soul of what's being proposed before you.
Yeah.
Is because, as this commission is aware, some of the special uses that we've seen, there were no concerns associated with them. So if we have special use permits coming to this commission and there is no contention, there are no items that really need to be discussed or addressed, we should make changes to our ordinance so they're not having to go through that 45 to 60 days typically for a special use permit, where the planning commission is once a month, site plan committee, typically we have about 2 weeks. And if it was administrative, I can probably do it in 48 hours,
Yeah. So yeah, moving some of these things to use permitted by right is great. It can only help the general public, I think. But
I think we could look at, in the past, like, if there's a commonality of certain things that are commonly or consistently going through as a special land use, and maybe change those to use by right.
yeah, and that was one of the things brought up, is if this special land use keeps coming up and
Yeah.
there's never any problems, why is it a special land use?
And
The
I
zoning
can-
board of appeals had done that before Doug's time, where we were getting variance requests for like the same things. It's like, well,
Yeah.
why don't we just change the ordinance? Because this is
Mm-hmm.
increasing costs and red tape for
Makes
everybody.
sense.
So I could pull up the last several years' annual reports
Yeah.
and see what types of uses have been permitted and like how many. And then maybe we could use that as a discussion point to.
Yeah, to see if there's any more that we can,
Because, yeah, the
shift.
proposals or the suggestions that are being made by the ordinance committee, some of these may have little to no effect, as we may not have a lot of some of these intended public hearings. It's just general information, but that'll help us in figuring out what the impact would be.
other folks not on the ordinance committee, thoughts?
Good.
No? Yeah, I think the general consensus up here is this is good work and we like it. And we're looking for more. Hey, you all agreed to be on the committee, so.
You lied to us.
I did not.
We do.
I am the alternate though, so I can't run my mouth too much.
Monday and I feel sick.
Yeah. I'm actually busy.
My stomach hurts.
I believe it's a required meeting.
If I'm sick, I can't come. I will go to my golf
Doesn't
lesson
matter.
after
We
that.
have sufficient social distancing here. We're okay.
All right.
That's the way to
Do
work
you
around
need
it.
anything else from us for this?
I
Doug?
don't need anything on that. We'll
Okay.
come back at a later date where formal action would be needed.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, I like it. Good. So that moves us to Mr. Powers' admin report.
So we're getting a decent amount of permits, as you can see before you. Development time is coming. I'm sure many of you have noticed what's going on in Mid-Villa. Couple other items want to talk about. One, recently happened, 115 High Street. The developer there has stated that he's not intending to move forward. So we are in the process of working with the attorney to try to give the council options for what, could be done in that instance. So hopefully it won't delay what that future plans are. 36 State Street. We've received a purchase agreement from the developer for that property. However, the attorneys still need to vet out a handful of options before it'll be ready for the council review. But another notable, that developer, they just had their groundbreaking ceremony at the Royal Stagecoach. For anyone that's not aware, it happened earlier today. So, feel free to go check it out. Just kind of give you an eye into the future because it's a very similar site to the State Street property. Master plan joint meeting, hoping that we can tentatively schedule a meeting around July 17th with the council and the planning commission. I don't know what your availability looks like, but if everyone wouldn't mind checking, maybe it's Fair Week. I believe that's the day we said. Okay. All right. So we're going to try, I can send out a doodle poll, but we're going to try to schedule a joint meeting because as you recall, we received the survey results and prepared a report. But before we talk about what types of changes possibly need to be made to the master plan, hopefully a joint workshop session can start us with a good dialogue point before we have to prepare any asks for budgetary purposes. Other than that, it's summer. Hope everyone has a good 4th, and if you have any questions.
Questions for Doug?
Yeah, but it looks like we have a new employee helping us out.
So,
Oh, were you not here last?
No, because
So-
Kim was still here last month.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kim was like, here.
well, Cassie came, I believe it was in March, is when she introduced
Yeah.
herself.
She was
gonna say.
DDA.
I'll give her a chance. I'm sure she would
Okay.
love to introduce
Hi.
herself.
My only question is that council plans to, 36 State Street to have a full development agreement and everything.
That's
Just
correct.
like they had done next door here.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's just that the current conversation, we said we need to get a purchase agreement in place before working on a development agreement. So when they get the purchase agreement hashed out, then we'll be able to start moving forward with the development agreement.
Okay. We have Bob's report.
If anyone has any questions, be more than happy to try to answer them.
No? All right. Moving on. Comments from up here?
Everything's good?
No? Well, great. I will make the motion, we adjourn.
Support.
We have a motion with support to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, sorry. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned.
Caught you sleeping.
Sorry, Rhonda. I know. That one's on me.
So Jason, I heard McDonald's.
That was quick.